2025 horror is smashing it so far. Hello my fellow weirdos and welcome back to my YouTube channel. You have no idea how exciting that is for me to introduce my YouTube channel. I've been wanting to do this for so long. Anyway, let's get into this video because it's going to be a long one. Today I'm going to be talking about all the horror books that I've read so far in 2025 that have come out this year. A few of them haven't even come out yet. So I'm going to let you know what I think of them, my brutally honest opinion. To be honest with you, there's only one 5-star in this, but there are so many 4 stars and so many bangers. So stick around to see what I think of the books. Let's start off with the first book, and that was Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Chloe Chapman. This book, if you're not into politics, and I will preach this forever, but horror is inherently political, but this book pushes it a little bit further. We follow mainly an American US standpoint in this because it refers to Fox News and it's also set in America. But I feel like this can be applied to definitely to the UK as well. And it's all about media consumption and the way that we are addicted to media, the way that we kind of live in these echo chambers of our own idealations. But hopefully you know the point that I'm trying to make. This has been quoted by Jordan Peele, and it very much reminds me of sort of a film that Jordan Peele would direct. We follow Noah Fairchild as he realises that his parents are becoming more and more addicted to Fox News. And one day he drives to their house because he realises he hasn't heard from them for a while, and his parents start acting really, really strange. And it's him kind of trying to navigate his way around that. And then after that all happens, everything kicks off, and he soon realises that society is following in the same lead as his parents are, and he is essentially just trying to get back home to his family. Now, this covers some really serious issues, but the way that it is written is so satirical and humorous, and was honestly so enjoyable to read. Now, I definitely think it would have its audience. I know that some people aren't going to like this book just because of its strong political nature, but I loved this book. I rated it 4 stars simply because the ending didn't work for me entirely, but that did not take away my enjoyment of the rest of the book. And I love Chloe Chapman. I've read one other book by him, What Kind of Mother, and that again, I feel like it's a book that would divide people. His work, his books are definitely love or hate. You're either really, really gonna despise them or you're gonna love them. Hopefully you will love them because I do. So the next book that I'm going to talk about hasn't actually come out yet. It comes out in April, and it is definitely one of the contenders for horror book of the year in my opinion, and that is When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. Now, thank you for Titan for sending me this ARC copy. I was definitely shocked when I received this. I ended up rating this one 4.5. It was almost a perfect read for me. This reminded me very much of like old school horror, horror you would find in the 80s. And to be honest with you, I haven't read many horror books that have come out recently that are like in that style. And I do think it's kind of refreshing to see because it's almost like we're celebrating horror that has been out for so long by reworking that. So props to Nat Cassidy for that. So in this book we follow Jess, who is a struggling actress, and one day after her shift in a diner she comes across this young boy who's a runaway, and she soon discovers what he's running away from, which is the boy's father. There's a little bit of a twist to this. His father is definitely a little bit, shall we say, a threat. So Jess decides, from the goodness of her heart, she's going to take this boy under her wing and run away with him too. And what I loved about this book is obviously the 80s references. It did kind of read like a Stephen King book, so bear that in mind. But the characters in this were so good. The boy was such, and I call him the boy because you will find out in this book why he hasn't got a name. But Jess and the boy were such brilliant characters. They had a great relationship, and it delved into some such strong emotional issues that it felt so real, and it felt so in tune with just like human emotions in general. I rated this one 4.5, and to be honest, looking back at it, I can't remember why, because for me, I can't stop thinking about this book. I would definitely consider changing my rating for this, I think. But this is definitely going to be on a lot of people's favourites of the year. It's just I feel like it's a classic already, and it's not even out yet. And I have read 4 of Nat Cassidy's books before, and I think this is definitely one of my favourites. Either this one or Mary. I can't decide which. And Mary, to be honest with you, Mary was such a good book, and I love an old female main character, which is definitely why I love Mary so much. But this one, I know so many people are going to love it. The next book is Shy Girl by Mia Ballard. Now, there is something about women writing extreme horror which just slaps. And this book is no exception. This was an ARC that was sent to me by NetGalley, and this comes out, I believe, next month or April. And Mia Ballard is definitely an author that I'm going to read from again. This was the first book that I read from her. And we essentially follow Gia, who is struggling. She's come to a crossroads in her life, and she is depressed. She's wanting a change, and she gets into sugar daddies. She finds this website, she uploads a profile, and she finds this guy, and he doesn't seem like any usual guy from the website. So she's intrigued and she wants to know more. So she goes to meet him, and he essentially wants somebody to be his dog. I mean, massive trigger warning for this book, by the way, because there are some scenes in this which I cannot stop thinking about. And it is very graphic. So if you are into extreme horror, by all means, go and read it. If you're not, then maybe, I don't know, maybe don't. I think what's important to mention about this book is the way that the author tackles some feminist issues. This book is saying something. It's not just a man doing his typical thing and then that's it for the fun of it. There's actually a point to this book, and I do think that is explored very well. I also think the writing is great. There's some like almost humour to this, which I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I was definitely laughing at some parts. Some parts I was actually, some parts I was disgusted by, but in a good way. I rated this one 4 stars, and I definitely recommend it if you are into extreme horror. You will definitely have a laugh with it. And yeah, like I say, I read a lot of extreme horror, and I feel like the more I read into the genre, the more I prefer the extreme horror written by women. So there we go. Keeping with the theme of unhinged and extreme, I read Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fato, which is a book that is coming out this month in February. This is essentially American Psycho, but in the Victorian times. I think the clue's in the title, really. This is quite a short book. I think it's about 200 pages or something. You could definitely read it in one sitting. And the humour in this is done so well. It's essentially told through first person, and we get to know all the workings and the mind between Winifred, who is a new governess for an estate. So she's looking after children, guys. Let's just I mean, if you know what she was thinking, you wouldn't want her to look after your kids, just put it that way. For me, this book, I've read a lot of books like this before. Obviously American Psycho, Mayfly, Boy Parts. It is that kind of vibe. And is it getting a little bit too oversaturated with the whole unhinged psycho? Kind of, yes. But do I still think it's worth reading? I definitely think it's worth reading. But for me, I had a lot of critiques, and I think the main thing for me was the character of Winifred. We got to know why she was doing it and why she was this way, but I feel like it could have been pushed and explored further, and I feel like we could have got a little bit more from that. And I'm not usually one to say that a book should be longer, but I feel like in this case it genuinely should have been a little bit longer. I wanted more of a character study, and in 200 pages I feel like it's very hard to do that. So the author did a good job at it, but I also feel like the author could have explored the character a little bit further and made the book longer. But this has been made into a film, guys, starring Margaret Qualley, and I am hyped for that because I absolutely loved her performance in The Substance. If you haven't seen The Substance, it was one of my favourite films of last year, and I definitely recommend it. So yeah, I definitely still recommend this book. I rate it 3.75 stars. And I am off to see the author next week, going to an author event. So I'm going to try and vlog it for you all, and yeah, I will give you more of an update on that when I've been to the event. Another popular book that's coming out next month is The Unworthy by Augustina Bastarrica. Now, don't ask me how I have got a proof of this, especially this amazing edition, which comes with a quote from the book. These words contain my pulse, my blood, my breath. Absolutely, thank you so much to Pushkin Press who sent me this edition. But here's the thing with this book. I thought it was a lot of vibes and not much plot. I did rate this book 3.5 stars because overall I did enjoy it. However, would I go all out there and say it was a 4 or 5 star? Definitely not. We follow an unnamed narrator who resides in a cell in a mysterious convent called the Sacred Sisterhood. Now, the first half of this book, we do get quite a bit of world building, and we get to find out more about this sisterhood, which I was really, really enjoying. However, in the middle of this book, it kind of takes a turn which doesn't, to me, connect with the first half of the book. Therefore, for me, I cannot say wholeheartedly that I enjoyed this because I wanted more from the first half of the book, and I wanted the first half to connect with the second half. And yeah, it just didn't do that for me. I think what I will say about this book is it did have such a great atmosphere. Like Augustina Bastarrica wrote Tender is the Flesh, and I don't think that she will ever top that, in my opinion, because I just loved that book so much. I know it gets hyped up and I know it gets talked about a lot, but I just absolutely devoured it. And this one, I just think I was critiquing it and comparing it to that. I feel like this is one for the weird literary girls. I'm definitely a weird horror gal. This book does have some unhinged elements to it, but is it something that I've never read before? Not really. Therefore, in that case, I feel like the social commentary and the world building has to be really unique and good. And I just think this did have a lot of potential for me. But yeah, I didn't love the second half of this, unfortunately. But don't let my opinion discourage you, because I feel like a lot of people will love this book. I just wasn't one of them. Next book was Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. This came out this month. This is Carmilla reworking, but it's also set around the Peak District and in Sheffield, which is where I'm originally from. So I went to this author event a couple of weeks ago where Kat Dunn was there, and the way that she was speaking about this book had me so intrigued. And then she mentioned that it was set in Sheffield, set in the Peak District, and yeah, I was gagged. I have never read a book before that's set in the Peaks in Sheffield, so I was buzzing to read this. In this book, we follow Lenore, who is with her husband, and her husband owns a steelworks factory in Sheffield in the 1800s. It's set, this book, and with his work, he's had to go they're just moving up from London to an estate in Hungerstone, which is a fictional place in the Peak District, and it's set in an estate called Nether Shore Edge. And some of the places that it talks about are real places, like the Botanical Gardens in Sheffield, and it's got Stanage Edge in there, and it's got a few other places it references. So yeah, I was definitely intrigued to go into this one. I felt like this I don't know if it is marketed as such, but I feel like for me it was more of a gothic mystery than I would say a gothic horror. And I was expecting a little bit more of the vampire element in this, with it being a Carmilla reworking. That there is some in this, but again, towards the end, it kind of like takes the foot off the gas a little bit, and it goes more into like a mystery. And yeah, there was a lot of elements to this book, and I do think as a gothic book it does work. But was it my cup of tea completely? No, I feel like it is, again, on the lighter side of the horror. But it does raise some great feminist issues. I liked the character, but again, did it need to be this long? Probably not. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I do think it'll have its audience, and I do think if you're just getting into horror and you are into vampires as well, you would enjoy this. But yeah, for seasoned horror readers, I'm not too sure I could recommend this wholeheartedly. There was a lot of elements to this book, and that wasn't the only one. And to be honest with you, that was the one that I was here for, and we didn't get that much of it in this book. The next book that I'm going to talk about is going to be a popular one, and yeah, I agree, there's a reason why. Grady Hendrix, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. This is the third book that I've read by Grady, and to be honest with you, the only book that I've really, hand on heart, enjoyed. I read Horror Store, and I read Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires a couple of years ago now, and I didn't love them. I felt like they was a little bit too camp for me. However, this is a totally different style to his usual. It's more, I would say, it's definitely horror, but it's got like a very much strong historical element to this book. And it's set in the late 70s, where it delves into these homes that were very popular back then for girls who were getting pregnant. And what these homes essentially did was house the girls and let them birth the baby in secret, whilst then giving the baby away. And the girls didn't have much choice in the matter. They were sent there, their parents sent them there, and these homes were very prominent in that period of time. And I'd never heard of them. They were in the 70s, and I feel like bringing to light such history that is obviously unjust and dark is great. It does follow female perspectives, and this is a man telling the story. So I was a little bit apprehensive going into this at first. However, I feel like Grady definitely handled it well. In the acknowledgements, he did mention that he had a lot of women better readers, and the witchcraft element was more of like a supernatural. It kind of felt like an afterthought, if anything. So if you are reading this book for the witchy element and you are into witchy books, maybe take that into consideration, because I would say the heart of this book is the historical element. But I do think that the witchy supernatural elements complemented this nicely. I ended up rating this 4.25. I do think that it was handled great, but I do think the historical elements could have been slightly pushed more. And there was a tiny little bit of disconnect between the two plots. Essentially, we follow two subplots, and I do think there was a tiny little bit of disconnect towards the end. But yeah, I loved this book. I listened to the audiobook for part of it as well, and the audiobook was done really well. So I definitely recommend that. And yeah, I really, really do recommend this book. I feel like historical and horror just go hand in hand, to be honest with you, because history is dark, and then to kind of elevate that with some supernatural elements, I feel like it's a great combination. Other books that I have read similar that follow suit to this are The Reformatory by Anna.reads.horror. Excellent book, faultless. It was one of my tops of 2023, 5 stars. And then also When the Reckoning Comes by Latanya McQueen. Those two books, outstanding, actually outstanding. So yeah, I am very partial to history and horror together. Next book is 8114 by Joshua Hull. This book was creepy. It had some moments in it where I even was a little bit freaked out with some of the imagery that was coming from it. There was a creepy old woman, and it very much reminded me of Samara from The Ring. So in this book, we follow Paul, who runs a podcast, and he finds out that one of his old friends from his town, from his small town, has committed in Paul's old house. Now this house is like had a lot of creepy history to it. There have been a lot of situations and a lot of supernatural things that have gone on in this house. So Paul goes home to discover what is happening and what has happened, and he tries to get to the bottom of it basically, but he does this probably not in the best way, but he does this by trying to incorporate it into his podcast. I don't think his friends love that, but yeah, he definitely, as the book goes on, we as a reader get to find out more and more about the history of this house, essentially, and there are some very, very creepy moments to this book. I think this book is definitely a strong contender for, well, in fact, it is one of the creepiest books that I've read in a while. If you are just after a classic creepy scare, almost jump scary in some parts, then definitely pick this one up. I rated this one 4 stars. And yeah, Joshua Hull's writing is extremely visual. I feel like he is a screenplay writer as well. So any writer that writes screenplays knows how to plan those images in your head. Let's just say that. Last but by no means least is my 5 star, and that is The Lamb by Lucy Rose. Now, as you can see, I got a signed copy of this book. Now, I actually went to an event with the author a couple of weeks ago, and honestly, just the way that she spoke about this book was, it just, I'd read the book by this point, but I was just so mesmerised because all of the stuff that she was saying to do with feminism and a lot of the issues this book brings up. This is a literary horror, and we essentially follow Margot and her mom, who live in the Cumbrian wilderness, very secluded, and they eat people. They find strays, what they call strays, so people who come across their homestead, and they lure them in, kill them and eat them. And this is essentially a coming of age story, and it's told in the perspective of Margot, who is an 11 to 12-year-old girl. And yeah, we get a whole lot in this book. There are so many quotes in here which are just so beautiful and stunning. And it is almost like it's a heartwarming story, even though the nature, obviously, of this book is not very heartwarming. They are cannibals. But we get a great relationship dynamic. When I say great, not great. It's done, the author's done it in a great way, but we get this toxic relationship between mother and daughter. And we as a reader almost feel like we're in the know because we are getting told from an 11 to 12-year-old's perspective. And we, from the get-go, we know that something tragic is going to happen in this book. This is one for the gothic girls. This is one for the weird girls. This is one for the literary girls, I would say, because the horror, although the horror is still dark, just the way it's written is so stunning. Like the first line of this book, let me just read you, because from the get-go I was hooked with this book. It literally says, on my 4th birthday I plucked 6 severed fingers from the shower drain. I mean, from then on I was hooked. I could talk about this book all day long, and I think what I'm going to do is a full in-depth review of this because I just want to talk about it more and more. But yeah, this is going to be, I 100% guarantee this is going to be in a lot of people's favourites of the year, and definitely pick it up. If you're going to take one recommendation from this list, let it be this book. So there we go. I think if you are looking to get into horror, you have got some great options that have come out this year. I just think horror is getting better and better, and I think the more that we talk about the horror books, the more that we share with our friends, the more that we post on social media, is just going to get better and better. So definitely comment below if you've read any of these books, or if you're wanting to read any of these books, and let me know which ones. I will be doing a more in-depth review of The Lamb, but if you wanted more in-depth reviews of any of these books, please be sure to let me know. And yeah, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. It's very much appreciated. I'm still in the start of my YouTube journey, but you can follow me on the other channels. But yeah, let me know what other content you're wanting to see, and bye for now.